Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back after the pizzas. I know this is not as exciting as the pizzas. So I'm Yin Harn Lee. I'm a senior lecturer in law at the University of Bristol. My research started out being in video games and copyright. I'm a copyright scholar. And I also do copyright history as a break from copyright and games. So my PhD thesis was on video game modding and copyright. And this is because a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I used to mod a game that is now suddenly relevant. I used to mod Baldur's Gate 2. And Carter made the point about features and mods being picked up in official releases. I'm not sure, but I think our community came out with a feature that is now in Baldur's Gate 3. So we're all quite happy about it. And in a weird turn of events, one of the lead writers for Baldur's Gate 2 is now a colleague of a member of our modding community who has started his own video game studio in Australia. So who says games to get you a job, right? So this is a talk that I think follows on quite well from what Carter and Ben have said. And it's looking, I think, quite broadly at generative AI in the context of game development. So at the creation process, at the creation end of the process, and thinking about what the wider implications might be, and perhaps not just confined to the game industry, but to the general entertainment and creative industries as well. So when generative AI tools first became widely available, I, like many other people, played with them. They were quite funny. The kind of weird, art AI hallucinations were quite funny. But then as things progressed, I became a bit uncomfortable because there was a lot of rhetoric around talking about how soon artists will be obsolete, soon filmmakers will be obsolete, soon game developers and game designers will be obsolete. This made me uncomfortable. And it was interesting that I was uncomfortable because I don't know if you know, but most copyright scholars are pro people being able to do interesting things and fun things with copyright works. Most of us are not copyright maximalists. There is one, we don't talk about her. So most of us think copyright protection is too extensive, reform is needed so that people can do fun, interesting things that aren't harmful. So I think it was interesting for me to have that sort of reaction to generative AI. And then thinking about this, I wanted to think about whether, is this a problem? Is this a legal problem or not a legal problem? Or is it some combination of both? And should we solve it through legal intervention, some other kind of intervention, or both? And if we want legal intervention, what are the sort of legal levers we can pull to get to the kind of situation that we want to be in, to quote Ben, to get closer to the world that we want to live in. So this is kind of an attempt at thinking through some of these things. So generative AI is unfortunately everywhere, including, I don't know why, in my work laptop, I open it and Microsoft asks me if I want to do something weird. Is also in the game industry. So here are some headlines. On the left, Ubisoft has created an AI tool that would generate NPC dialogue. This is Ubisoft Ghostwriter. I think they did a tech demo. I think no one was very impressed. Fallout meme, everyone disliked that because the dialogue produced was extremely bland and very generic. And given that Ubisoft's reputation is already for creating very generic worlds, people were not sure that this was a step in the right direction. But there were also, I think, concerns that this would affect game writers. And bearing in mind that people have really started taking writing in games seriously for not a very long time, that was a matter of concern. There's also High on Life's walls are covered in Midjourney AI art. High on Life is supposedly a comedic first-person shooter. Somebody noticed that the posters in the game showed sort of symptoms of AI art generation, weird fingers, too many hands, too many feet, and then this became a thing. The co-creator then admitted that they used Midjourney to add finishing touches to in-game posters. Then Blizzard, with its concept art tool, something called Blizzard Diffusion, which is apparently its internal AI. The name Blizzard Diffusion is a play on Stable Diffusion, another an AI image generation platform. And reportedly, this is being used to help generate concept art for game environments, as well as characters and their outfits. Apparently, employees are told that this would not impact their jobs, so they have nothing to worry about. There's a report on the right-hand side. On the bottom right, is video game actors are afraid about AI tech taking over their jobs. This is specifically in the context of voice actors, although now video game acting now comprises also motion capture, as we've seen with Baldur's Gate 3. This, in the context of this, is Altered AI, a company that promises to give game developers the tools to create compelling professional voice performances. And it has a library of voices that you can use to populate the game. The report suggests that the people who actually the actors who actually did all this recording for the voices in their library were so concerned about backlash that they didn't want to be attributed. So this has created an environment of uncertainty, and taken against the backdrop of the state of jobs in the game industry, which is extremely bad. Although the last year has been a very successful year for games, and this year seems to be trending in the same direction. There have been a lot of job redundancies, a lot of studio closures, including at very high profile companies, and skimming Twitter, which suggests that very senior people are looking for jobs and not finding them. And people are even suggesting that you will have more job security being a freelancer or being an independent developer, which has traditionally been a very precarious enough position. So some of these headlines I'll just run through. So how AI is feeling uncertainty. This features, among other things, an interview with a video game artist who is a member of the Independent Workers Union of Great Britain's Game Workers branch. And they have an artificial intelligence working group. And she says that against the backdrop of redundancies, suspicion among employees is that the people making the decisions see AI as a path to cutting costs when labor is their biggest expense. She also says in this report that she knows one person who's lost work due to AI and has heard of it happening to others. And there are lots of accounts suggesting that particularly jobs in concept art and other entry-level roles are particularly affected. There are a couple of headlines dealing with the Game Developers Conference, which it seemed to be quite a depressing experience. A survey released by the Game Developers Conference found that 84% of respondents said they were somewhat or very concerned about the ethics of using generative AI. Also, I think 90% reported that they were using AI somewhere in their work processes. So they're using it or being made to use it, but are worried about it. Their concerns included whether it would lead to more job losses, whether this would lead to intellectual property infringement in a number of different ways. Wired, that's the headline in the middle, did quite a long report on this phenomenon. And the emerging consensus from that, well, they've identified an emerging consensus, which is that concept artists, graphic designers, asset artists, and illustrators so far in the industry have been most impacted. So, as Carter has said, some form of AI, loosely defined, has been used in game development for a really long time. A couple of examples here. First one is procedural generation. So this is an example of this is Rogue. Anyone played this or another roguelike? So This is a game where one of the features is that every time you die and start the level, the level is randomly generated. The layout of the dungeon this is meant to be a dungeon, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. The layout is randomly generated. The items and so forth are randomly generated, and this adds interest and replay value to the game. You also die permanently. There's none of this, safe scumming nonsense going on. Sometimes you just want to play a hardcore, And then, some form of something also called AI has been used to control characters and entities in the game that you don't control. So, for instance, non-player characters, they do things while you're not. Instead of standing statically in the background waiting for you to interact with them, they run around, they get into trouble. Sometimes, I think when I was playing Oblivion, somebody stole something, and then there were some guards ran after them, and that was quite entertaining to watch. And also opponents, if you're playing against a computer, you want a decent opponent who can fight you. I put as an example, though, the main reason I upgrade my gaming PC a lot, which is The Sims 3, a surprisingly resource-intensive game to run, when you let your neighborhood grow for 100 years, a few hundred years. And the game would be not what it is if sort of the characters you're not controlling at the moment can't kind of walk around autonomously, drinking from here. What they're drinking from are, the game tells us, juice kegs, because no alcohol in the world of The Sims, and then getting into fights and arguments and basically shouting at each other, going into the pool, not realizing you've deleted the ladder, and so on. The game would not work without this AI broadly construed in this form. So, when I was thinking about why I felt uncomfortable with the use of generative AI, this was what I thought, that these are examples of AI broadly construed to make the games what they are, the best version of themselves. Whereas generative AI, as it's currently now used, seems to be trending in the opposite direction. I was also thinking through what would be, sort of like projecting forward, what would be some issues that you had to bear in mind given the proliferation of generative AI in the industry. And it was very sad that I could quite readily look at other creative industries and then see kind of like, well, this is where it's going. One of the industries I looked at was actually translation, which has been absolutely decimated. Not sort of technical legal translation. That's still fine because they need like a real person to pin some liability onto and some responsibility. But sort of in game localization, subtitles for anime, sort of like manga localization, that sort of more creative sphere. What is currently being done a lot of the time is the translators are not being given translation jobs. They're handed a piece of text that has been translated by a machine and told, yeah, just edit this, just put in some tweaks, make it read a bit smoother. And of course, we will be paying you much less than the already low rate we were paying you previously. And of course, I have done some translation myself. And I'll tell you, working with the machine, you look at the machine text and you go, I'll just do it myself from scratch. That's easier and that gives you a better product. So if that is the kind of thing that we're seeing that will be the future of the video game industry, there will be things, one of the first things to look out for is de-skilling. So you will no longer, basically, what we've seen from what I saw from the kind of headlines and reports was that especially entry-level jobs are being affected. If there are no entry-level jobs, there are very few routes left into the industry, and there's no way to sort of develop a really good set of basic skills and then work your way up. I think we're also seeing that in kind of TV writing, because in the UK, with the sort of slow death of the soap opera, there are no longer entry-level jobs where a junior writer can come in, learn the ropes, learn how a set works, learn what a TV schedule looks like, and that level of basic training that we possibly didn't notice was there and necessary is gone. I think the same thing might be happening in the US TV writing context with the slow disappearance of writers' rooms, where you would get a whole staff, and now you just have a very small team, which might explain why we have 8 to 6 episodes per season every 2 years of every TV show now. And then there's attrition, which is related, and that's when the people who are senior retire from the industry, and then there's no one there who can sort of replicate the same skills and provide the same training. There's job degradation, which I mentioned in the translation context. Your job gets less nice. So this might also happen in the other creative industries. For instance, instead of writing a character or a quest or something like that, you're told, well, this is a scenario that the AI has spat out, just sort of like punch it up a bit, you know. And also, you're not a writer, you're just tweaking it, so we won't really credit you or pay you like the standard writer's rate. We'll pay you a lower rate. So yeah, that is a thing that we need to watch out for. The lack of opportunities feeds back into the first point, which is the lack of entry-level jobs. If no one is doing the sort of very basic writing, art tasks, and so on, then there's no entry point. And finally, the erosion of standards, not just within the industry, but within the audience. So right now, I think we can tell the difference between good art, widely defined, and bad art. And I think most people would agree that so far what we've seen come from a lot of generative AI tools, especially if unmodified by a human, is not very good as art. I think my very real fear is that if this sort of technology becomes very standardized, we won't know what's good or bad anymore because there will be nothing that's good. And I think this is slightly happening in sort of the kind of translated works space, not serious translation, but the kind of translation I mentioned just now. People reading manga, people watching anime. Sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, this translation has been really well done." And I look at it and go, "No, these are not English sentences. These have been spat out by a machine, and then they've changed the punctuation a bit, and that's all." And that is slightly worrying because that suggests that the person telling me that it was good, they genuinely believed it was good, possibly because they don't read anything else, but that sets their standard for what good is. And if we don't know the difference between what's good and what's not good, we can never reach for good. Like, that's the thing that kind of worried about. So thinking about possible legal tools, some legal, some not fully legal. I don't mean not fully legal in the sense of illegal. I mean the things are not statutory or case law. So there's copyright, and people have, I think in the room, people have been having these conversations about copyright in the context of generative AI. There are two questions mainly that emerge. First, whether the products of generative AI are protected by copyright. I think currently not in this jurisdiction. And then second, whether it is copyright infringement to use protected works as training data to feed the AI, which I think currently in this jurisdiction, it is probably is. But there's a question about whether that matters or not, really, because that doesn't seem to deter a lot of generative AI from being used, which is, I find very odd, because you would imagine in a creative industry, you will want to make sure that you do own the intellectual property rights in the thing that you're putting out on the market, and yet that seems not to be happening. Specifically, I think for perhaps voice actors, there's also performers' rights, which are currently quite weak. So performance rights at the moment, they attach to a specific recording of your performance. So there's nothing to protect your performance in the abstract. There's nothing to protect your voice or the particular way you've acted this character, just that specific instant. It only protects that specific instance of a performance. Performance rights associations have argued that these need beefing up, and maybe there should be specific protections against the synthesization of your performance. That could offer some protection. I would suggest why not in a bit. There are also moral rights, in particular, the right of attribution, which is the right to claim credit for work that you've done. If that, at the moment, that is easily and routinely waived by performers and creative people. So if that was made mandatory and unwaivable, that could offer more protection, slightly more. There's also passing off, which could be helpful if, like, say, for instance, somebody used the AI approximation of a famous actor's voice and then tried to pass it off as, oh, this actual famous actor came to our studio and voiced this character. But that will only work in very limited circumstances where there's active misleading or where there's misrepresentation going on and where the actor is sufficiently famous. I think a lot of problems, if we're trying to deal with this problem using performance rights and moral rights at the moment, is that you can easily alter all of these through contracts. So basically, whatever rights the law gives you, a lot of the time, if you sign a contract with a rights holder, a publisher, a capitalist, they will simply say, oh, yes, give us all the rights and waive all the ones that you can't give. Otherwise, you're not working in this town. So you sign that over. You don't really have a choice. So possibly that is where more of the work could usefully be done. There's also collective action. We've seen a lot of interest in the game industry in unionization, which is quite unusual because I think people have been usually quite individualistic, especially if they're in the States. But even in the States, there's a lot of interest in that. That could get somewhere. But I don't know, maybe this is, a list of choices that we need to make. And unfortunately, the people with a lot of power don't seem very inclined to make positive choices in this direction. I suppose I just want to emphasize that, and following on from what Ben said, this is not inevitable, right? That the role of capital is to extract from the worker, the creative, everything, and give them a pittance, if that. This has not historically always been the case. And now I will tell you about the 19th century Victorian art market. That's relevant because that was called the golden age of the living painter. People who were alive and painting pictures actively, working actively, were making a lot of money. And this was because art dealers were quite generous in their dealings with painters. Art dealers offered painters rights that they didn't strictly have under the law, for instance, offered them more than they were strictly legally entitled to. And maybe that feeds back to what Carter was saying, that just because you can legally take something away from someone doesn't mean that it's a commercially sound or ethical decision. Because I think they recognized everybody was in the business of making money, but I think the art dealers realized that if you keep the painters more or less happy, materially comfortable, working away, you can all make more money than you would do. And of course, there's also, I think they were also more concerned about the long-running state of the industry than possibly the people with the money in current creative industries are. I don't know why that's become the case, but now there's a lot of short-term thinking instead of thinking about we want to make a good game. We want to have good relations with our audience. Now it seems to be about how can we make the people who make the game suffer a little bit more. I don't know why there seems to be a lot of cruelty in this system. I don't know where that's come from. But anyway, things can only get better. No, they can't. We've seen that. I'm sorry this has been a downer ending. But maybe we can change society. Who knows? Anyway, thank you. Yes.
Do you think because the general audience of the sheer numbers of game players now with mobile games, maybe that has had an impact on the way people are designing them, building them, because if you get it out quickly and you do some good marketing, you probably make some money before people have realised that your game is
not good.
Is shockingly bad, yeah.
Well, sadly, yeah. Sadly, I think that is becoming, it's entrenched as a model now, not just in games. in books.
Yeah. Lots of media.
Yeah, I mean, I hate book talk is apparently a thing. These are people who performatively read books on TikTok and tell you what good books are. Most of the books they talk are not good books. But for the publisher, what's important is you have like a high concept that appeals to these people. You give them a list of tropes. Hey, this has enemies to lovers. You like that, don't you? And then you put on a nice cover. The nice cover is important. And then this you send advanced reader copies out to the people, the book influencers. They exist now. And then you get like 3 months of hype, and then people start realizing, oh, this book is really bad. But you've sold. So
TikTok, the race to the bottom of every creative media, basically.
oh, how much of this can be laid at the feet of TikTok? Carter, you had a question.
What positive trend are you seeing in the gaming industry at the moment?
Oh God. I don't know. Oh, unionization. Like, I think that's worker solidarity is a move in the right direction. I know the tech industry has historically been quite individualistic. I know this when I am full disclosure, I am a member of my union, and I used to be a union representative in my workplace. And I don't want to name names, but there are some departments in the university that are very well unionized and some that are very individualistic. And that matches with tech people being quite individualistic. So I think that's a step in the right direction. I'm just concerned that union laws are so strict, and unions have been so, there's very little institutional memory left of how unions can be effective. I'm not sure if that's enough, but it is a good thing. Yes.
Is the trend of people not recognizing quality, is that kind of like related to idiocracy? People are just getting dumber altogether?
I mean,
the
process.
I was thinking, like, the reason mobile phone games sell so well is because those people have never played a quality game, so they're unable to tell the difference between a piece of garbage and that. And I was thinking, are they actually dumber than people before?
I don't think people are inherently smarter or cleverer. I think it's an effect of what things you're exposed to and what opportunities that you have. I would slightly dispute that mobile games are uniformly bad. I think you can do interesting things in that medium, but
I think it's less quality. And maybe the better thing instead of saying dumber or smarter, I say more distracted. They're more distracted.
Possibly.
Access as well, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Most people have a mobile phone.
Yeah.
Not everybody has like a gaming PC. Yeah.
Play Subway Surfers, and they're like, oh, well, that's just feed my attention. So.
Yeah. Also with the pricing of the PS5 Pro, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who buys that?
Just drawing on to a comparison with the Victoria data, which I think is a really nice one, because that was an area as well, wasn't it, of increasingly strong protections for the author as a figure. Sort of the law helped protect the IP that existed within that individual rather than what used to happen before that, which is much harder to sort of say, like, the author is owner of this work and this is their output. So do you think there needs to be a sort of similar awakening towards both the dangers of automation and the kind of potentials of retaining what it means to have authorial input in these things? I mean, it's a big question around as well at the same time, but we're questioning what authorial intention inevitably means again because of generative AI.
Yeah, possibly, because I was talking to a friend who doesn't care about law or games. She's a Dickens scholar. Her house looks like it's from the 19th century. And she was saying that one of the things she was thinking about this, and she said one of the important things to me about art is that someone is communicating to me through it. Maybe that needs to be highlighted. Now, granted, I think there are sort of risks with the sort of like, putting the author on the pedestal sort of approach, But maybe it needs to be emphasized further that, I don't know, these are things that people make ultimately. It's not something that some sort of anonymous corporate process spews out. That might be trickier for games because they're more technical, they're definitely a group effort. But, at the same time, there's also a tradition in in games writing, thinking about games, of the figure of like the really famous designer. So yeah, maybe this will make us think again why we value art and the people who make it. So any more questions, or is everyone too depressed to just speak?
On that note about saying, like becoming unionized, like, do you think there are going to be loads of game companies and studios that are going to go, we are building everything and there's no AI involved? And that's going to be a movement of people to say, if they've been kicked out of all their other,
Yeah, hard to mention Larian, so they are taking that line very clearly, and I think a couple of indies, most of the indies, might go that way. Actually, I'm surprised that not one big studio has come out to like really major player has come to say we are not doing this AI nonsense, because we value integrity, and you're all welcome. You're all welcome to jump ship and come to us. I'm not sure why that hasn't happened.
Maybe
Yes.
it might be a future job as like a human gamer. So if I want to play a video game, I want to play against a human. You can hire somebody to prove that. Just like playing against the AI is not very fun. It can beat you all the time. There might be like, as all the jobs get destroyed, right? I used to be a video game designer, but now I play video games as a designated human.
There are people already professionally playing games, like both glamorously in esports and less glamorously, gold farming, as we used to call it. No, I think there's value in having. Though I don't like playing against other humans. When I play games, I just want to I play games to not interact with other people. I realize that this makes me an outlier now. Because one of my students said, "Oh, can I add you on Discord?" And I was horrified. But okay. Although that leads me to think about dead internet theory, that the internet is just bots talking to other bots, generating more bot stuff. Maybe in future you think you see a human playing a game, but it's actually an AI, and they're all playing against each other.
Paste somebody in the same room as you. You're real, right? Like a phone.
Yeah. We used to do that. We used to have internet cafes and LAN parties. Yeah, bring back the LAN party. To be clear, I also didn't like LAN parties.
If someone paid you to go to a LAN party, would you go?
No. It depends. Am I destitute? Am I destitute at that point? Because my main memory of LAN parties is my brothers bringing their friends, my cousins bringing their friends, and then they ate all the snacks. And then, as the sole vaguely female-shaped figure in the room, apparently it was my job to acquire more snacks. But maybe that's why I didn't like them. So I feel the discussion has deviated. Yeah.
I think it was quite interesting your comparison with the translator jobs, and I feel they are more advanced in this process.
Yeah.
Keep talking this parallel. It seems to me that maybe they are not going to improve their situation. Like translators seem kind of game over. If you work for law, they're needed. But all the rest, probably every few months you get a new smartphone with more automatic translation. So I don't know. It's like as compared to seem when there is a specific case where things didn't go in the right direction, it doesn't seem going to improve. What you comparing this?
If you look at the translation, obviously it's quite a segmented field, translation. There are sort of, as you said, technical legal translation that's still okay because you need someone to sue, basically. I think is what's happening. Yeah, but sort of prestige literary translation is also fine. If somebody is translating your Booker Prize-winning novel, they're probably doing it. Yeah, it's probably not AI, and they're probably doing it to quite a high standard. It's sort of in the big like popular media translation that I think a lot of issues are happening. That doesn't seem to be improving.
Yeah, I mean, the subtitle,
Yeah.
I think that came over. I'm
Yeah.
starting to see automatic subtitle generation clicking a button. I don't know, seeing even automatic generation. It's not perfect, but the reality is now, okay, that is this, that's life. So it's like a field that for some specific area, we're already seeing it, accepting it.
Yeah, which is, I think, links back to what I said about what the audience is prepared to accept. Because I think if you can teach an audience to say, no, this is not good enough. We don't want machine-generated things. We want humans who put thought and care into the work. And we will not be paying for things that have been generated by a machine. We want certain standards. Maybe that is another way of applying pressure. Granted, it hasn't worked very well in popular media translation because the standards are very low. But that could be another lever that you could lean on to try and make things slightly better. Yes.
It kind of feels like you want to almost like charge more for human gains, so that it's seen as like a levy. It's like if you use AI, then it costs less money. If you pay for the right games, then you get humans.
But if you use AI, it can't be copyrighted, so just copy for free. Don't pay at all. No, seriously, if there's no copyright, why pay?
Yeah, but just a small part in the oil. It would be a fraction of all the product. So this the copyright things when you're developing this specific part of the other thing. 1 year ago there was like a game type of event. They were talking about the music production. They were already using AI. Okay, anyway, it's background music.
Yeah.
Fine, and then they already I think it was less 1 year ago. They're agreeing. Oh yeah, the quality is a bit lower, but it's happening already. And then so this process is in a lot of sector, and seem bad. I mean, I'm an engineer. I feel protected. For everything I do, they need somebody to be sure to say it's right.
Yeah.
They cannot automatic type of product. But where it is a bit more is I like it or not, instead of to be is correct or not, then AI generative can be really look already dangerous. Things that maybe I didn't think about it before, but now we just start to see in the news for the writer,
So you had a question.
Yeah, one of the elements that I think is of ethical concern is which media or which content from which parts of the globe, which cultures, which ethnicities, or which national origin is used to train AI, and given that there's a sort of disproportionate amount of content that's used to train AI from certain parts of the world, global north or Anglo-Saxon, or those that have more content digitized and subject to being web scraped, the media that is, or the content that can be generated and synthesized is more natural and is more easily used for generative AI models. Is that, I mean, it's a big tangent from where we are, but it was a concern for you in your...
Well, not directly, but I can see the point that we've had these discussions in art and media, right? We want diversity and so on. And if AI is mainly trained on certain easily accessible, popular sets of data, then it's going to disproportionately reflect the views and experiences of that group of people. Yeah, so that is also another thing. Although I will say there have been weird instances where the AI company has gone, and our first black AI model, and then you go like, oh, you're not even going to give a black woman a job now? It's like they have so few jobs. And now you're taking that away from them. Okay, sorry, I think we've definitely overrun.
No, it's good. It's good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.